There was a moment right in the middle of my ordinary life when I realized something chilling. I was invisible. My name is Luke. I'm 32, and I live in Spokane, a city that doesn't quite have the charm of Seattle, but isn't a dull backwater either. It's one of those places where you can feel like you belong, but also feel completely forgotten at the same time. I'm an accountant by trade: numbers, reports, balance sheets. Every day I sit at my desk, locked in a loop of data entry, verifying transactions, making sure the books align. A job that could swallow a man whole if he's not careful. The world passes by outside my office, but I rarely notice. It's easier that way. I've always been the steady type, the kind of guy who avoids risks and seeks comfort in the quiet routine. But even that was wearing thin. There's a gnawing emptiness I can't shake. I work hard, go home, and do it all again the next day. I can't tell if it's the life I've chosen or if it's the life I've been assigned. There's a difference, you know. A choice means you're in control, but I don't feel in control of anything. Not of my job, not of my family, and certainly not of my heart. My apartment is small, modest, 2 rooms, just enough space for a couch, a TV, and a kitchen that looks like it's straight out of a magazine from 1997. I live alone, except for the occasional stray cat that hangs around the parking lot of my building. I can never get rid of it, but it's easier to let it stay. Easier than making real connections, I suppose. My parents, Joan and Tom, they live out in a neighborhood in the south of Spokane. It's a nice place, I guess. Suburbia at its finest. The house looks like it belongs on the cover of a magazine. It's always immaculate, neat, perfect. If you scratch beneath the surface, you'll find a different story. My dad's a lawyer, successful and always poised, and my mom. She's the queen of passive aggression, using kindness as a weapon, always trying to manage everyone's expectations. She runs the house like a tight ship, but underneath that polished surface, there's a coldness that I can't ignore. Then there's my brother Dylan. Dylan is the golden boy. He's everything I'm not: charming, confident, a real go-getter. He runs a flashy tech company in Seattle, making millions while I sit here crunching numbers. He's the one my parents beam at with pride, the one they never stop comparing me to. They've been doing it my whole life. It's hard not to feel like a failure when every conversation with my parents seems to end with a reminder of Dylan's success. Why can't you be more like him, Luke? Dylan's got it figured out. Dylan's got friends in high places, deals on the table, and a future that looks brighter than mine ever will. He doesn't need to work hard. People just fall into line for him. Me, I've always had to struggle, always had to prove that I'm worth something. But despite everything, I keep to myself. I don't complain. It's just easier that way. But there's something about living in the shadow of someone else's success that starts to eat away at you. Every compliment Dylan gets feels like a dagger in my heart, no matter how genuine the words are. Every time I hear my parents gush over him, I feel smaller. I know it's irrational, but the jealousy seeps in, and that's not something I like to admit. It wasn't always like this. When we were kids, Dylan and I were close. But as we grew older, the distance between us became more pronounced. He went on to do big things, and I stayed here, working in the same office, doing the same thing every single day. The pressure to be like him, to make something of myself, has been relentless. But no matter how hard I try, it feels like I'll never measure up. I once had a crush on a coworker named Eliza. She was smart, funny, with a spark in her eyes that made the dullest of days feel alive. We'd sit together during lunch breaks, and she'd laugh at my terrible jokes. For a while, I let myself believe that maybe she saw something in me. But I never had the courage to ask her out. What would I say? Hey, I work in an office with no windows and crunch numbers all day. Want to go out with me? The thought alone felt pathetic. So I let her slip away, just like everything else I've ever wanted in my life. One Friday, things took an unexpected turn. I'd just finished another grueling day at the office. It was fall, and the city was starting to look like it belonged in a painting: leaves, turning gold. The air crisp with that unmistakable scent of change. I stopped at a local coffee shop for my usual black coffee and a sandwich, eaten alone in silence. That's how I lived. Quiet, routine, simple, until my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. Luke, come to the house. We need to talk. Her words were sharp, urgent, and something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was nothing, but a sense of dread washed over me. I didn't ask questions. I just drove straight there. When I pulled up to my parents' house, the usual picture-perfect facade of suburban life felt off. The garden was as neat as always, but there was a heaviness in the air that I couldn't shake. I parked my car and stood for a moment, looking up at the windows. The warmth of the porch light flickered through the curtains, but it didn't feel welcoming anymore. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something waiting for me. I knocked, my heart racing, as if I already knew what was coming. Mom opened the door, but her smile was strained, nothing like the warm greetings of the past. "Luke, come in," she said softly, stepping aside to let me through. Her eyes were red, though she tried to hide it. Something was definitely wrong. Dad was sitting at the head of the dining table, his usual authority looming over the room. He didn't even look up as I entered, his fingers tracing the rim of a wine glass. Dylan was already there, sprawled across the chair with his phone in hand. His usual smile plastered across his face, though I could tell it wasn't entirely genuine. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but the words came out heavier than I intended. Mom sat down next to me, her hand reaching for mine, but her grip was tense, like she wasn't sure how much comfort she could give. "We need to talk about our future," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "About the house. And about you." Dylan raised an eyebrow, glancing up from his phone but not bothering to give me the usual brotherly greeting. His eyes flickered to me for a brief moment before returning to his screen. "Yeah, I think it's time we all had a serious conversation." I leaned back in my chair, unsure whether I should feel like a participant in a family meeting or just an outsider who was about to be told something unpleasant. Dad set his wine glass down with a deliberate clink, meeting my eyes for the first time tonight. "Luke, we've been looking at the property out in the suburbs," he started, his voice steady but carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "There's a new development perfect for a fresh start. Your mom and I have been saving up, and Dylan's got some ideas for expansion. We just need a little help from you." "Help," I repeated, the word echoing strangely in my head. "What kind of help?" Mom cleared her throat, her eyes flicking nervously toward Dylan. "The house. It's about $800,000. We've got $450,000, but we need you to cover the rest. $350,000. If you can help with that, we can make it happen." I stared at her. I couldn't breathe for a second. $350,000. That was more than my entire savings, everything I'd scraped together over the last decade. Every cent I'd earned by living frugally, by putting off vacations and car upgrades. I had it all tucked away for a future that felt more distant with every passing year. But this was a big ask, a huge ask. I don't know," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's almost everything I have." Dylan didn't look up from his phone. But he added, "It's a good investment, Luke. Think of it as an opportunity for all of us. Could turn this into something big." My heart raced, my mind a swirl of confusion and uncertainty. I looked at my parents, their faces filled with expectancy. My mother, who had always been the master of persuasion, was now asking me for my future. My father's eyes were sharp, but they carried a strange sense of urgency. As if this moment was more than just about a house, it was about something much bigger. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. In their eyes, I was just the solution. The one who could solve their problems. The one they always turned to for help. Even when they barely acknowledged my existence outside of these moments, I didn't know what to say. The money I'd saved wasn't just for a house. It was for my security, for the future I wasn't sure I'd ever have. But as I sat there, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about the money anymore. This was about being wanted, being needed. "Okay," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "I'll help. I'll give you the $350,000. The room fell silent for a moment. My parents' faces broke into smiles, but I didn't feel the joy that should have come with a decision like this. I felt the cold twinge of something else, something far more unsettling, but I couldn't stop now. "Thank you, Luke," Mom said, her voice soft, almost maternal. "You're doing the right thing." Dylan stood up and walked over to clap me on the back. "You're a good brother, man. We'll all be better off once we have that house." I left their house that night with my mind a storm of thoughts. I had given them my savings, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd planned for. And yet as I sat in my car, the reality of what I had just agreed to sank in like a stone. Was I really doing this for them? Or was I doing it because I didn't know how to say no? The emptiness inside me grew deeper, more hollow. There was a part of me that hoped, just hoped, that this would finally make them love me the way they loved Dylan. That maybe, just maybe, this would make me a part of their world, no longer the quiet, invisible brother, but someone they could lean on. But even as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just sold myself, and I wondered if I would ever get it back. A month passed in a blur of routine and paperwork. I wired the $350,000, every last cent of my savings, into the family account. They were ecstatic. My mom sent me a message. "It's all coming together, Luke. We're going to have our dream home, and we're so grateful." Dylan sent a thumbs-up emoji, as if that would make me feel better about the entire thing. But for me, nothing felt better. The house was supposed to be a symbol of unity, a place where we could finally all be together, like a real family. But something about it felt wrong. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no idea what this dream home actually meant for me. It was a new chapter for them, a new chapter I was paying for, one way or another. The day I drove to the new house in the suburbs, I felt like a stranger. The place looked impressive from the outside. A sprawling 3-story structure with a white picket fence, manicured lawns, and trees lined along the driveway. The kind of house you see in commercials, too perfect to be real. And yet, there I was, standing at the doorstep, hoping this would be the moment where everything changed. I knocked on the door, my heart thudding in my chest. This was supposed to be the start of something new. Family dinners, Sunday gatherings, the warmth of a home finally shared. But when Mom opened the door, her smile wasn't as warm as I remembered. It was forced, like she was holding back something. When I looked past her, I saw Dad sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in his hand, staring into space. He didn't even acknowledge me at first. "Luke, you're here," Mom said. Come in." I stepped inside, my shoes making a dull sound on the polished floors. I felt out of place immediately. This wasn't my house. This wasn't home. It was just an expensive property in a neighborhood where the only thing that mattered was appearances. I asked again, "What's going on?" He called me here, and I thought we were going to talk about. Dad interrupted me, his voice colder than I expected. "Luke, this is our house. You helped us make it happen, but that's where your involvement ends." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Mom chimed in quickly. "You gave us the money, Luke, and we'll forever be grateful for that. But this is about us. It's for the family." Her voice was sharp, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Dylan, who had been sitting at the table like he hadn't heard a word, finally glanced up. "Yeah, man, it's a great place. You did the right thing." He leaned back in his chair, eyes back on his phone. His voice sounded rehearsed, like he was reading lines from a script. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like family. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of what I had just stepped into settled over me. This wasn't the fresh start I had envisioned. This was a house. A house that was supposed to bring us closer together, but in truth, it felt like I had just bought my way into a gilded cage. They didn't want me to live here. They just wanted my money. I had handed it over, hoping that would make me part of something I never was. I wasn't part of their world. It was just a tool they used when it was convenient, and now I could see it so clearly. I turned to leave, my stomach sinking. I couldn't be here. This wasn't where I was meant to be. Luke, Mom called after me, but her voice didn't sound like it cared. "Luke, you're our son. Don't be like this." I paused, looking over my shoulder, trying to steady my breath. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're my family. But you never really needed me. You needed my money." And with that, I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to clarity. The house wasn't a home. It was just a reminder of everything I wasn't to them. I got into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand that they give me back everything I had lost. But there was nothing left to say, nothing to prove. As I drove through the dark streets of Spokane, the feeling of betrayal gnawed at me. My mind raced with thoughts of what I could have done differently. How did I end up in this situation? But the worst part, I didn't even know how to escape from it. I had given them everything, and they had taken it without a second thought. They'd shown me in the coldest possible way that nothing I did could ever be enough. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and frustration. I returned to my apartment that night, but it felt empty, colder than before. It wasn't just the loneliness. It was the sense of being utterly unmoored from everything I had once believed about my family. They weren't just asking for money. They were asking me to be complicit in a lie, to pretend that the bond between us had never frayed, never become this hollow thing. I tried to push the anger down. I had to. I still had to get through each day, to keep pretending everything was fine at work. But when I sat at my desk, staring at the endless rows of numbers, it all felt meaningless. The bills, the invoices, the reports, they didn't matter anymore. They were just distractions from a life I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. I knew something had to change. But what? Then, a week later, I got the text. It was from Dylan. His message was brief, but his words made my blood run cold. "We need to talk. Mom and Dad are freaking out. There's something you need to know." The weight of the message hit me harder than I expected. Why now? Why would Dylan reach out after everything that had happened? The same Dylan who had been so quick to brush me off, to dismiss my feelings like they were nothing. I sat there for a moment, staring at the message. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to erase his number from my phone and walk away from the whole mess. But another part of me, one that still longed for something resembling family, wondered if there was more to the story. Was I just a pawn in something larger? Or had I been blind to something else all along? I didn't know. I had to find out. I agreed to meet him the next morning at a small diner on the outskirts of Spokane. It wasn't my first choice, but it was neutral ground somewhere between the familiar and the unknown. When I arrived, Dylan was already there, sitting in a booth by the window, his phone still in his hand. He looked up when I walked in, flashing that same familiar smile, but it was strained, as if he wasn't entirely sure how to act around me now. "Luke," he greeted me with a short nod. "Glad you could make it." I didn't sit down right away. I stood across from him, arms crossed. "What's going on, Dylan? What do you want?" His eyes flickered with uncertainty, but only for a moment. Then he exhaled deeply, leaning back in his seat as if he was preparing for a conversation much harder than it should have been. "Look," he started. "I don't know how to say this, but I need to be honest with you about everything." I remained silent, waiting. My pulse quickened. "Mom and Dad," he continued, lowering his voice, "they've been hiding something. A big something. Something that goes way beyond just the house and the money." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" Dylan looked around, as if making sure no one else was listening, then said in a hushed tone, "It's about the investment. The $350,000 you gave them. It wasn't just for the house. They used it for something else. Something you're not supposed to know about." I felt my breath catch in my throat. My mind raced, trying to process the implications of his words. "What are you saying? Where did the money go?" Dylan swallowed hard, his usual bravado gone. "They've been in debt for a long time, Luke. I'm talking about a lot more than what they've told you. It wasn't just about needing a house. They've been funneling money into bad investments, trying to cover up some big losses in their business." I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about? Why didn't they tell me any of this?" Dylan's expression softened, the mask of arrogance slipping just a little. "Because they didn't want you to know. They wanted you to think you were just helping them get a better life, not covering up their mistakes." He paused, his voice lowering to a whisper. "And I didn't know how to stop them, Luke. But I couldn't keep lying to you either." A cold realization settled over me, and the anger began to bubble back up. I had been used again. This whole thing wasn't just about a house. It was about their failing businesses, their reckless investments, and their unwillingness to admit they were sinking. "You mean they lied to me? Took my money to cover their bad decisions?" I whispered, feeling the betrayal in my chest like a physical blow. Dylan nodded grimly, his eyes avoiding mine. "They didn't know how to fix it, Luke, and I didn't know what to do either. But this thing, it's bigger than any of us." I stood there for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I had trusted them, had given everything I had to make them happy, to prove that I was worth something to them. And they had lied to me, used me, without a second thought. "You don't have to keep playing their game, Dylan," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "You can walk away. You don't owe them anything." He looked up at me, his eyes hardening. I wish it were that simple, but I've been in this for so long I don't know how to get out. I felt my anger flare, but I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. You should have told me sooner. You should have told me the truth. I know, he muttered, pushing his plate away as if he couldn't even bring himself to eat anymore. I just didn't know how. I took one last look at him, my brother, the golden boy, and I realized something. He was just as lost as I was, trapped in the same toxic cycle of lies and expectations. Maybe it wasn't just Mom and Dad who had used me. Maybe we had all been caught in something much bigger. A family falling apart under the weight of its own secrets. I walked out of the diner without saying another word to Dylan. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. I needed to break free. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about finding out who I really was, beyond the shadow of a family that never truly understood me. And if that meant leaving everything behind, leaving them behind then, so be it. The weight of Dylan's revelation didn't lift. If anything, it only got heavier with each passing day. The clarity I had hoped for, the moment where everything would suddenly make sense, never arrived. Instead, the realization that I had been played by everyone I trusted left me feeling more isolated than ever. I spent the next few days holed up in my apartment, my mind buzzing with everything Dylan had said. The house, the money, the lies, they were all a part of something bigger. A web of deception that stretched far beyond the four walls of that new suburban house. I had been a pawn in their game, and now that the pieces had shifted, I was left wondering if I could ever piece my life back together. I hadn't even spoken to my parents since the night I walked out. Part of me wanted to confront them, demand the truth, make them admit what they had done. But I already knew the answer. They would deny it, twist the truth, shift the blame. It wasn't worth it. They'd always seen me as a means to an end, and now they had drained me dry. The worst part was the silence. No calls, no messages, nothing from my parents. I had expected them to beg, to try and convince me to come back, but instead, they let the distance grow. It was almost as if they didn't care that I was gone, that I had just disappeared into the ether. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like they had only used me to keep up appearances, and when that was no longer possible, they'd let me go. I was nothing to them, and that realization was a bitter pill to swallow. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I needed answers. I hired a private investigator, someone who could dig deeper into my family's finances and find out exactly where the money had gone. I needed proof, something concrete to hold on to, something that would confirm everything Dylan had said. The investigator was good. He was thorough, tracking down old business records, analyzing financial statements, and interviewing anyone who might have information. He didn't waste time, and within a week, he had uncovered something that made my blood run cold. My parents had not only been mismanaging their business for years, but they had also been involved in a series of shady investments. My $350,000 had been funneled into a losing venture, a failing real estate deal that they were desperately trying to salvage. It wasn't just bad luck, it was incompetence, greed, and a refusal to admit their mistakes. But the worst part, they had taken out loans, maxed out credit cards, and used other people's money to cover their tracks, all while asking me to foot the bill. I was livid. The anger I had been holding inside finally exploded, and I couldn't keep the rage at bay anymore. But it wasn't just anger at my parents. It was anger at myself, for trusting them, for believing that one day they would see me for who I really was. For thinking that the love they had for me, if it ever existed, was unconditional. I decided it was time to confront them. I walked into their house without knocking, knowing full well that this would be the last time I'd ever step foot inside. The door was unlocked, and I pushed it open. Walking down the familiar hallway, the smell of fresh coffee still hanging in the air. Mom was in the kitchen, her back turned as she washed dishes. She didn't hear me approach. I stood in the doorway watching her for a moment. She always had this calm, controlled aura about her, as if nothing could ever rattle her. But today, I could see the cracks, the tightness in her shoulders, the way her hands moved just a little too quickly. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but cold. She froze, her back stiffening as she turned slowly. The moment she saw me, a flash of guilt flickered in her eyes, but it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. She wiped her hands on the towel before turning to face me fully. "Gosh," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know everything," I said, my words like stones being thrown into the air. The money, the investments, the lies. Her expression didn't change. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice strained but controlled, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I didn't let it control me. I couldn't. I had to keep my composure if I was going to get any real answers. "You've been lying to me for months, Mom. You and Dad. You used me to cover your mistakes, and you've been doing it for years. I want the truth." She sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping slightly as if the weight of what I had said had finally hit her. "Luke, I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice shaking now. "You've always been different. You've never understood the pressure we've been under. Your father and I, we've made mistakes. Big ones. And we didn't know how to fix it without involving you. And you thought taking my money would fix it?" I shot back, the bitterness in my words cutting through the room like a knife. "You've always treated me like a backup plan, something to rely on when things go wrong. You don't love me, Mom. You just wanted my resources." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she took a step toward me, but I didn't move. "I didn't want to use you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I wanted to fix things, for the family. For you, but I was desperate. Desperate, or just selfish?" I said, my voice louder now. "You never once thought about what I needed, what I wanted. You only cared about yourselves." She stepped back, hurt flashing in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Luke. I truly am. But you have to understand." "No," I interrupted. "I don't have to understand. Not anymore." I turned away, walking out of the kitchen and heading for the door. My father appeared in the hallway as I reached for the handle. His eyes were cold, calculating as always. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't find the words. My anger, the betrayal, the crushing disappointment, it was all too much. I opened the door and stepped into the cool evening air. I didn't look back. I could feel the weight of everything I had just learned settling on my shoulders. But even as I walked away from that house, from that family, a part of me knew that this was the final step. I was done being their fallback. Done being their safety net. I had given them everything I had, and they had thrown it away. But I wasn't going to let them take me down with them. As I drove away, I looked out at the city of Spokane, a place that had never felt like home. Maybe it was time to start over somewhere new where no one knew my name. Somewhere I could be free of the past and the people who had used me for so long. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of restless nights and uneasy days. The conversations with my parents, with Dylan, and the investigators' findings left me mentally exhausted. I didn't want to be here anymore, not in Spokane, not in my apartment, not in the life I had painstakingly built for myself over the years. It felt like everything I had worked for had been torn away in an instant, like I was walking through a fog of disappointment and betrayal. I didn't trust myself anymore. I didn't trust anyone. And as much as I had tried to convince myself that it was over, that I was free from their manipulation, knew that my parents and Dylan would never truly leave me alone. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about money, about power, about control. As much as I wanted to turn my back on it all, I couldn't ignore the looming reality. They would keep coming for me. They wouldn't stop until they drained me dry again. That thought gnawed at me every day. One afternoon, I sat in the park near my apartment, watching the sunlight filter through the trees as I tried to clear my mind. The city was buzzing with life, but it felt distant, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I wasn't a part of it anymore. Not here, not with these people. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from Eliza, the woman I had once admired from afar, but never had the courage to talk to. She was a coworker from my last office job, the one I'd always quietly crushed on, but never had the nerve to ask out. "Hey, Luke. Are you doing okay? I've been thinking about you lately. If you need to talk, I'm here." Her words caught me off guard. She was one of the few people who had actually noticed I was struggling. But I didn't know how to respond. What could I say? That my family had destroyed everything. That I had lost my identity, my savings, my sense of self. I left the message unread for a few hours, unsure of what I wanted. The idea of pouring my heart out to someone who wasn't part of my past, was terrifying. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to take the first step toward rebuilding. I finally called her back that evening. When she picked up, her voice was warm and gentle, as if she had been waiting for me to reach out. "Luke, it's good to hear your voice. How are you holding up?" I exhaled, the breath I didn't realize I had been holding leaving me in a rush. "Not great," I admitted. "I've been going through some stuff with my family. A lot has happened, and it's left me feeling lost, I guess." There was a pause on the other end, and then she said, "I can only imagine what you're going through, but you don't have to go through it alone. I'm here if you need anything." I let her words sink in. I didn't know what I had expected her to say, but the simple kindness in her voice made something inside me shift. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe there were people who could see me for who I truly was, people who wouldn't judge me for the mistakes my family had made. "I appreciate that," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore, but maybe I need to leave. I need to find somewhere new, somewhere I can breathe again." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her tone was understanding, almost protective. "I think that sounds like a good idea. You deserve to take care of yourself. You've given so much to others, it's time to start focusing on you. You're stronger than you know, Luke." Her words hit harder than I expected. I realized that I had spent so many years trying to please people, my parents, Dylan, coworkers, trying to be what they wanted me to be. But I had never once thought about what I needed. I had never let myself ask for the things that would make me happy, the things that would make me feel whole again. "You're right," I said, the truth resonating deep within me. "I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I think I have to leave Spokane. Maybe I'll head somewhere new. Start fresh." Eliza's voice softened, a note of encouragement in her words. "Wherever you go, I know you'll make it. You deserve peace, Luke. You deserve happiness." We talked for a little longer, and as the conversation wound down, I realized something profound. I had a choice. I wasn't stuck in this cycle anymore. I wasn't trapped in the expectations of my family or the shadows of their mistakes. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own future. I spent the next few days making plans. I didn't need to stay in Spokane. I didn't need to stay anywhere that reminded me of the person I used to be, the person who was always trying to please others, always sacrificing his own happiness for the sake of people who didn't deserve it. I needed space. I needed a fresh start. I contacted a moving company, began packing up my things, and made arrangements to close my apartment. The process felt surreal, like I was shedding an old skin and stepping into something new. And when it was all packed up, when the last box was loaded into the car, I drove away from Spokane toward an uncertain future, but a future that was mine. I had no plan other than to find somewhere peaceful. I had been looking online at small towns, places where life moved at a slower pace, where no one knew who I was or what I had been through. Eventually, I settled on a town near the coast, a small, quiet place where the air smelled of salt water and the world didn't feel so overwhelming. The town was called Crescent Bay, a sleepy coastal town that felt like it had been forgotten by time. The people were friendly, and the rhythm of life was slow and steady. The town was filled with old homes, cottages, and scenic views. It was exactly what I needed. I rented a small cottage overlooking the cliffs, with a garden and a view of the sea. It was a simple place, but it felt like home in a way that nothing ever had before. The air was clean, and the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks was soothing. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the water, and I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Over time, I started rebuilding. Found a new job, an online financial consulting position, where I could work remotely at my own pace. I was no longer chasing a dream that wasn't mine. I focused on my own growth, learning what I needed to learn, and not for anyone else, but for me. I began to heal. As for my family, I never heard from them again. I didn't need to. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Family is not about blood. It's about those who choose you. I had chosen myself. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sun set behind the horizon, I reflected on everything that had brought me here: the betrayal, the pain, the journey of discovering who I truly was. And I realized something that filled me with peace. I wasn't running away from my past. I was running toward my future. And I finally understood that true freedom wasn't about escaping, it was about letting go.